MOLWENI, SANIBONANI, Unjani. How are you? Are you okay? So, today's video is with Warren and Glynn, Glynn and Warren, one of or two of my favorite people in the world, and we have a really good conversation about the queer community. And so this is the third and last episode in the queer community conversation, and I hope you have lots of fun and you learn lots of things. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the video. My name is Keisha Lee, and I'm your host for Take It All. To tell us who you are and what you do, and where in South Africa we can find you.
We're in South Africa.
You can find you.
Okay. Please don't find me. Anyone out there. So I'm Glynn. I'm an educator. I'm also a heritage worker in Cape Town. What else?
That's it.
Okay.
I'm Warren, and I'm a fitness instructor, and you can find me in Cape Town.
Hopefully.
Okay, so this is part of the series called the Queer Community Conversation. You will be the third and last episode. So today's questions are going to be similar as last week's episode, just a bit different, tailored to the two of you, because you are my first couple that I've ever interviewed on Take It All podcast at all. Anyway, so Warren, do you want to start first? Could you tell us about how you identify and about you?
Okay, I identify as a homosexual, and that means I am sexually attracted to people of my own sex.
It was very to the point. I love it. Thank you, and God.
Yeah, I prefer the term gay. Homosexual is very hectic, very scientific, but yeah. I'm a gay man, and in the context of this conversation, I'm obviously many, many more things than that.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that today we're talking about queer issues. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, does your identity, the gay man part, is that like part of your sexuality or sexual orientation?
Exactly that.
All of those things.
Yeah, your sexual orientation. Yeah.
Okay. So then, do you guys make use of pronouns?
Yeah. Him, he.
I prefer him, he.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So obviously I explained earlier on about this new age term, letting in instead of coming out. So what do you think about this new term? Because we spoke that the coming out and the term coming out and the process also is very traumatic and can be very harsh, especially younger people, whatever stage you're coming out as. So then the new term that I've learned recently and also in the podcast I've been using is letting in. So I think it sounds much better and also has less mental impact, I want to say. Because it's not like I'm coming out of they say coming out of a closet, but now you're letting people into your world because you've always been this particular person, you've always been this particular way. So now it's you letting people in to see the individual you've always been. So what do you think of this term letting in and not using the word coming out?
You want to start?
I'm a little envious of the term because I wish I had this mindset when I was 13 years old when I came out. I think part of coming out is, for me personally, was a way of introducing me to people regarding my sexuality. Everybody knew me as Warren, but what was Warren and what is Warren? I suppose trying to find a place in their world. Coming out means I was trying to blend into society. You understand? I was trying to blend into society. like I said, to let people know who I was. Coming out is hard work. It was hard work because there's a lot of there's always a mental process that comes with it. Like, how am I going to do it? You have to sit and think and you need to strategize. Because number one, you don't want to be rejected. And there's a part of you that wants people to understand you. But this whole letting people in, I think it's a chance for, look, it's not something that just applies to younger individuals coming out, because there are older individuals that come out at later stages of their lives. I mean, I know people in their late 40s that only came out, but they're still stuck on the coming out part. But I think the letting in is creates much more of a relaxed environment about your strategy.
Do you think it's a better term?
It's a better term, and it's a bit more non-stressful.
It's a better term. Okay. Uncle Glynn. Or just Glynn for today.
Just Glynn.
So what to say, just Glynn.
Glynn.
Also, can I get and without giving away your age, can I get a time, an era when you said, because Uncle Warren spoke about particularly back then. So what was the time, the year, if possible, the decade when all of this happened?
Well, Warren came out much earlier than I did. So we didn't come out nearly the same time. It was what you said when you were 13?
13.
So that was in the 80s?
90s?
90s. Okay. And me in the noughties.
That's
to 2000s, yeah. Okay. So all of the noughts. Yeah, that's when mine was. But I was an adult with it.
Okay. So what was I don't know, do you agree that the term is better, letting in instead of coming in?
I think about it as two different feelings of the same process.
Okay.
So for me, coming out is filled with anxiety and fear, lots of dreaming about different outcomes, and it's about revealing, and it's not really about participants. It's just me, revealing something. And whether that person already knows or not, they can decide to be a participant or not. They can just sit and listen. But I think letting in means a different group of people to me. So coming out was possibly to people that it was going to be a difficult message to carry, and I needed to inform them. To say look, I need your attention in this moment, and I need to tell you something about myself. Where letting in was more for people that I already had trust with. For that. No, it's not to say, I had to come out to my mother. It's not to say I didn't trust her, but I needed to, have a dedicated time to inform her of that. But then there were friends, peers that I knew wouldn't have an issue. And my best friend, I never, ever needed to tell. But our interaction allowed me to let her in.
Oh, okay.
Because her support didn't have anything to do with my sexuality. We were just friends. And so as I became more comfortable in myself, I could let her in to those aspects of my life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yes. Okay. I like that, the distinction between two different.
I think also letting in, it's like Glenn says, you first have to have come out to say, this is who I am. Because it's something that you need to release within yourself. Say, this is going to be me for the whole world now for the rest of my life. And then I think the letting in part is how you filter who you want in your space. And it's also about a space. How safe can you make your space? You obviously let the people in like that you trust and also that you love and that loves you. And you invite them into your world. And you say, this is what I am about. So yeah, it's something to think about.
Yeah. And the distinction.
It's a process.
I like that. So you kind of mentioned earlier on. So I want to first start off by, you said you were 13 when you came out, right? And Uncle Glynn was much older, an adult, right? So I want to know, in your teen years, because on the show, so I've gotten questions from teenagers specifically asking, or not asking, rather saying, I've asked them to ask it, they share their stories with me, and I was safe enough, hopefully, that for them to share it. And they said that they live in homes where their parents make ridiculous comments about people who are of like homosexual or whatever else, or that particular group of people, the LGBTQ community. And for them, they don't feel like they can be themselves there. And they have this internal struggle. Why am I feeling this? Like, am I wrong? And a lot of other questions that go with the internal struggle, I call it. Did you have that at 13?
I think what I had at 13 was it was the fear that I thought I was alone. Why am I attracted to another male? The question is there something wrong with me? Does come into play because it's not normal. It's okay seeing it on TV and hearing someone else is gay homosexual, but when it's you, or if it's you, it's now close to home and it's real. And you know, it's the same shock to your family and to your relatives because it challenges their beliefs. It's not just challenging for you, it's challenging for them as well. And we mustn't take that for granted, that coming out as being gay is challenging for your loved ones too. I did sit with a lot of anxiety, but also there was a big part of me that actually wasn't afraid because I knew I was different and I was okay with it. I was very much okay with it. I was always myself. I have never, ever, ever not been myself. And I was fine with it. But the fear was is everybody else going to be fine with it? You understand? The love that I have for myself, I never lost. I loved myself at 13 because I knew I was different. And then I love myself still, the very same way. But the question was everybody else going to love me? And that was the fear. So that's what that's what brought on the anxiety, the wanting to come out, the wanting to tell people, this is my situation. I'm gay.
So that was your internal struggle.
Will people love me like I love myself? And you learn the answer is no. The answer is no. You always have your mother's love. For a father, it's challenging. It's a different story. You always have more of the female. You'll have a lot of females accepting you. It's difficult for the males. It really challenges everything about them, their beliefs, and also challenges their masculinity. I didn't have all that masculine influence in my life as a teenager because I had my mom, my sister, my grandmother. There was an absence of a father figure. And then I had my two brothers that were only babies because I'm the eldest. And then a lot of other uncles and a lot of other aunties, but you mostly see the aunties. Do you know what I mean? Uncles here via the grapevine about news and gossip and all this and what's happening in the family. But my biggest struggle was, will everybody love me? And it wasn't a case of acceptance. it wasn't really a case of acceptance. It was a case of, I think I already knew that there are people that will accept me or that will not accept me. And I also wasn't going to pressure anybody to accept me. And I think the idea with coming out is sometimes we do pressure people to accept us who we are. You understand? It does come with it. But at the time, I was already mindful enough to know that I'm not going to get this acceptance from everybody else. But here I go. I'm just going to throw myself out there now. And I'm just going to come out and say, Mom, Granny, I'm gay. Auntie, Uncle, I'm gay. And so, no, not everybody gave me that same love and acceptance. But as the years went by, people became accustomed to it and they became used to it. And you find people soften, people become gentle, people change. And not everybody changes. With coming out, you need to accept the good and you need to accept the bad that comes with it.
Can you, Uncle Glenn, just Glenn.
Just Glenn.
Kani. So, what was your internal struggle? Like going from, I've personally heard your stories from like long ago, because I know you for quite a while. So, like you spoke about, you went to school with my mom. So, I've heard that kind of background. But this is my first time knowing that you came out only in the noughties. I didn't know that. From what I've heard, I've always thought that you've known since back then, because of how you spoke about the beads working with your mom, or the bead stuff that you were doing when you were little. So I've never known that. That's me.
Oh yeah, no. Me knowing it. I mean, like we're talking about coming out. So coming out and self-realization are things that I'm making a distinction between, because my self-realization is internal. It's involving me. There aren't any participants. With coming out, there aren't also any participants. There's me, but I'm letting other humans know. So of course, before you come out, you have to be aware of yourself and to accept who you are, and then know that that is, who you are. So obviously that took place much, much earlier in my life, but I only started coming out officially, in the early 2000s to increasingly more and more people. But I mean, much earlier, and you try different things, because the emotions attached with knowing are not always easy. So even if I knew, I still had girlfriends. I still, because you hope that by doing certain things, it will change to go back to the norm, fixing. And so you try, you work at it, even though you know. Is that answering it? Was your question a bit broader?
No, I just wanted to know. So Uncle Warren spoke about his internal struggle being, will everybody love me the way I am? I didn't make the distinction between self-realization and the internal struggle as to when you came out. So I'd like to know, because you came out at 13. So when was your self-realization that, yes, I'm homosexual, I'm gay, I'm attracted to the same sex?
I actually don't know how to answer that question, because I just feel like I always just was.
It makes me think of that Lady Gaga song, I Was Born This Way.
Yeah, I just was.
And for me, I would listen to other kids at school, for instance. And then at a certain stage, attraction comes into the conversation and into the behavior. And so that hadn't started happening to me yet, but I, of course, fully understood that eventually it would happen. And it just, never ever happened with girls. So, because you're little, it's not like a very strong feeling, you certainly don't understand it. But then you just sort of like, okay, it didn't hit in at the same time with me like the other boys, but maybe there's something wonky, but eventually things even out at the end. And then if they don't, you really, really try with that, well-instilled Protestant work ethic. And then you do try, but then you have to eventually trust your gut that you've always known. You know that. And I think that's the first thing. It's like, you're not attracted to girls. That's like the first thing. Because of course you aren't attracted to all boys. And then you realize that there's a trend. Okay, all the people I feel this way about happen to be boys. Because you don't want to. Also, your parents, if they can, they raise you in a way that those people never enter your space. That gay people don't enter your space.
That is true.
So you don't actually have a reference point to know what gay is. And in the colored context, morphe is a very specific thing.
Yep.
It's a very effeminate, often transvestite, or often very flamboyant on the outside, and usually poor person. And so that's a very specific thing. But the term gay, you don't hear because no one speaks about it, and you certainly don't allow those kind of people in the home, in the church community, in the school community, in the broader community. I mean, like that you socialize with, and your parents socialize with. There weren't people like that so the name didn't really mean anything. There was nothing on TV. It was just, so you actually grow up quite alone, thinking that there is something medically wrong with you, and that things are either delayed or a bit, for lack of a better word, deviant, so that you really can't access help. You just keep it to yourself and you wait. So self-realization is that you know that you're different. You know that the trend of liking boys is becoming quite constant, and you know that it's not what it should be. So then you start thinking, okay, there's something pathological about it, but you don't tell anyone because you are you're scared of your security, and yeah. So the self-realization and the coming out is very, very different. I mean, I knew I was attracted to boys, but I hadn't really accepted to myself that I was gay. I know those two sound similar, but they aren't.
Yeah, very different. Wow. So my next question is a bit loaded. So I want to ask, how has your mental health been affected, right? From the self-realization, from the coming out to the coming out, and then now in this committed relationship. And then also on top of that, has this relationship impacted your mental health in a good way? Because I mean, you are now two people who are committed for me, it's been forever. So I just feel like that has been a good thing, right? It's a good thing. So yeah, how has your mental health been affected through self-realization, coming out?
That's a massive, massive question. So I'll try to be as brief as I can. So of course, understanding what I do now about mental health and the physiological links to the emotional experiencing of life. Prolonged stressful periods, prolonged several years constantly, strips you of your serotonin, puts you into all sorts of weird physiological feedback loops in your brain, so that eventually there's a collapse. And after that first collapse, it's very, very difficult to become fully healthy again, because you always remain vulnerable, I feel. You always remain vulnerable, even if you are medicated, to another collapse. Because then these pathways become mapped in your brain, from a physiological and from a medical level. And so mental health is always something that I have struggled with, that I always will struggle with. I can't quantify to what point my sexuality has affected it, but I definitely know that it has been one of the big, big impacts on my mental health. But of course, it's not like that for everyone. For me, it was like that. But I had a lot of internal struggles, like in the question that you asked, Warren. I grew up in a very... Am I drifting from your question? So contributing to the mental health is you're this one thing, but you know that you should be another thing, and that other thing is something that's real, because you grow up in a certain family that's very, very religious, but there's a very, very, very close-knit, firm unit that you love and that loves you, and it's something that's wonderful. And from a spiritual point of view, things are taught to you, and what you're experiencing is completely contrary to that. And that causes that internal struggle that doesn't do good wonders, for mental health, depending on what decision you make. It's one of the things that I love about Warren. He's a very decisive person. He doesn't let things linger. I let things linger, and I didn't just accept myself and love my family and love God, and just decided to do all those things: love myself, love God, love my family, love my fellow man, and go ahead. I kept on fighting, kept on wrestling, and Warren is very at peace with his fellow man, whether they piss him off or love him. He knows exactly where he stands with them and where they stand with him, and with his family and in his professional life and with himself. He loves himself. He knows who he is. And that's something that's very enviable. For me, the struggle with family ended a while ago, but with spirituality, I suppose it will always linger a bit. Yeah.
That is a really loaded question. I'm very sorry. It's a very loaded question.
No, it's okay.
So yeah, I'd like to know, how has your mental health been affected? Like from I was born this way to finally coming out and hoping that my family still will love me as much as I love myself.
Look, our experiences are different.
Yep.
Our experiences vary. I went through the old-fashioned way of being bullied by everybody. Okay? I don't want to really dig into that because I've put behind me a long time ago. But what people say to you and do to you, you can forgive, but you can't forget. It's just part of it. Your brain is meant to absorb information. You don't forget information. And when people say horrible, nasty things to you, it sticks in your head. Like I said, you can forgive it and you can move on from it, but it always lingers in your head. And sometimes it replays. And in a way, it does affect your mental health. Because sometimes you pulled out of the moment and you can't really explain how things resurface. It's almost like it's like a traumatic experience. And also in the manner and in the way which people handle you and treat you and address you or approach you. And nobody is kind about it. But that all comes from their lack of understanding of what they are dealing with at the moment. I'm sure a lot of, people who bullied me when I was a kid, maybe now might go, oh gosh, I wish I treated that guy better because I know so much better now. So that kind of thing can be forgiven. And I don't hold it against them. I don't hold it against the individuals who did it because I know it comes from a place of unconsciousness where they weren't really aware of what they were dealing with, because here's this guy and his feelings are different to mine and his actions are different towards my actions, and he's just completely different and I don't understand it. So I don't know how to react or act or be around him or her or whoever, So they go with their first instinct, which is always maybe a little bit assertive, aggressive, because they're trying to protect themselves maybe. I'm not making excuses for bullies. But I'm also trying to understand their mental process of dealing with me. So it's my mental process versus their mental process. And like I said, that is the kind of thing you can forgive because you're older, you're more knowledgeable. And that kind of helps with a mental health issue that might have come from it. But it always goes back to, if this guy said that to me, I wish I had a response back then, because you didn't have the perfect response. You say, hey, go away and leave me alone. Stop bothering me. You didn't have that capacity or that know-how back then, but they just went full force with how they reacted against you. But of that, the words stick. And when they do say something terrible to you, it hurts. And you deal with that. It goes into your adulthood. And it just somehow resurfaces all the time. But you got to have a process. You got to have a way of dealing with it. You can't just also let those things or situations rob you from your present moment and from your life right now. So you got to have a method or a way of dealing with it, especially in your adulthood. Something as simple as, if the head is a bit too noisy, put in your running shoes, go for a run. It won't solve the problem, but it brings it comfort, and it does take it away for a while until it resurfaces again. So it's all about process and strategy. How am I going to deal with myself? So yes, it does affect your mental health. And I suppose it's part of life. It doesn't have to be part of life, because that kind of puts a stamp on it that it's okay to bully. But you need to really use your brain, and you really need to think about how this happens both ways. With someone not understanding what they're dealing with, and you're dealing with this person approaching you and confronting you about yourself. Don't know if that answers it.
Oh, it does. So, obviously across the board, people who are different from others are going to be mentally challenged, unfortunately. And I don't mean like retarded, but I mean like mental health is going to be affected from the time you're asking yourself, am what I'm experiencing, thinking is normal? Like, am I normal? I think that's the question. Like, from that, I think your mental health is obviously going to take some sort of toll till the day where you are now comfortably in this committed, loving relationship. And still, like you said, like those words, sometimes they just come back. Even in 2021, like we get people who are, I don't want to make use of the word tolerant, because I feel like it's not something, I think tolerant describes a whole different thing. I think it's just acceptance and how you, as an individual, take in, like you said, the processing, like their mental health or the way their attitude, like I think like that. I think my words are just not making sense. But what I want to say is that mental health issues and issue can stem and start back then. Sometimes we can't always take care of them when they start.
No. So that's why I spoke about the physiological part. And it was important for me to learn about anxiety and depression, to read up about it. Thank God for the internet. Thank God for good psychiatrists. Thank God for good psychologists. They aren't all, but I mean, they're also just people.
Yeah.
But by the time you have the collapse, you're already threadbare. To build up those resources takes years, happy years, or medication. And it's difficult to get to that constant state of. So when these struggles or when these bullyings, when they start, they take their toll later.
Yeah.
It's difficult to deal with at the time. When you already hide yourself like I was, you can't access help because you're not calling for it, because you are hiding. And that is why gay people, especially gay men, are much more likely to commit suicide, to have depression, to have anxiety, substance abuse, behavioral patterns which are either self-harming or allow for opportunistic sexually transmitted infections. And then, of course, anxiety and depression further weaken your immune system. And so if you really, really don't practice self-care in a world which does not lavish the same affection to you as it does to others. Because I'm not going to pretend that I'm living in an oppressive state.
Yeah.
Then your mental health can can lead to your destruction, your end, and it's always a tragedy. But it involves recognizing that the way I'm feeling. I mean, if Warren remembers those words of the bully, and they hurt again, right? That's one level of torture that lasts. What I'm talking about is like once you have a disorder, once you have very persistent depression, once you have generalized anxiety disorder, it then becomes medical. Then it's not about remembering words. Then you are now physiologically, your brain is in a cycle where it has no resources and you cannot operate like other people do. That's then a very, very, very firm that says like, this is a disorder. This is not just remembering something hurtful and feeling sad. This is a disorder. Now you are now medically dependent on medication, therapy, prolonged healing things that can get you to a state of being operational again.
It is important to reach out when you need help. People think reaching out is weakness. It is very important. And even if you see someone suffering with something and you know it can be helped, encourage the person to reach out and seek help. Because that's the first step to self-care, is reaching out and saying, I need help. I need assistance. I don't know how to do this on my own.
So this one, I don't know if I should ask anymore, but you did kind of mention already earlier on about the spiritual stuff and Christianity and whatnot. So did religion or social expectations influence you in any way? I mean, after the coming out, before the coming out?
I'm gonna allow you to start. You know my answer is gonna be longer than yours.
Look, my family wasn't really, I don't come from like a very big church-going family background, religion. We were quite just fine and very neutral. You know what I mean? It wasn't a thing of the whole family on a Sunday morning is gonna all in a bunch go to church. And, it's not something that really mattered or I grew up with. I didn't grow up in a strict religious, household where there was no expectation. My mom was pretty much, accepting of everything and mindful, and she was actually very open-minded. And so was my grandmother. And that made us all in turn, very open-minded people. You know what I mean?
Can I ask
it was a peaceful household. Very peaceful household. We were fine.
There's nothing spiritually.
There wasn't spiritual. We weren't spiritually taught because there was no pressure. There was no pressure of you must have kids, you must get married, you must get this. I didn't deal with anything like that. I didn't deal with anything.
What about social expectations? Like how you mentioned, I don't know who mentioned masculinity earlier on.
I think I mentioned masculinity.
So I actually forgot about that completely. So what about masculinity? You now say boys don't cry, boys don't wear dresses, boys don't wear heels, boys don't look like this.
Well, like I said, I didn't have a father figure around, so I didn't go through any of those pressures because I was with my mom, my grandmother, and my sister, and we were all just fine. We could cry when we want to. We were comfortable to express ourselves the way we wanted to express ourselves. And I didn't ever feel the need to, when I did see my elders or my uncles and my other aunts, I didn't feel the need to, or I didn't feel pressured to act a certain way. So I didn't care really.
Okay, it was nice.
I really didn't care. That's the real Warren. Since then, I never cared. You either accepted me or you didn't. But if you didn't accept me, it was also okay. I wasn't going to force or pressure you to accept me.
Does somebody want to put the
I was very expressive,
Oh.
and everybody knew I was an artist.
Okay.
I was artsy. I was odd.
So you were never put into a box.
No. I wasn't put into a box. People just knew that's Warren.
It's artsy.
There's Warren.
Okay. That's one way of putting it. I like that. Artsy.
I really didn't deal with any religious restraint or God is going to punish me and I'm going to burn in hell. Those things were never uttered to me. It was never said to me.
So, Glynn, did you have any religious or social expectations?
I'm just thinking.
Prologue.
I'm looking at Warren and I'm thinking about trees.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go into natural areas, you will see a tree that's been damaged. You can see that there's a scar in the bark. You can see there's a bit of ash, so you know it's been through a fire. You can see there's some branches that have been broken because you can see the branch hanging. But the tree still gets to grow up, even though it has experienced damage. It gets to reach its full height. It reaches its potential. It's still a tree. Yeah? This is Warren. It's been through a lot of... People have done damaging things to you, but you still grew because it was natural for you to grow.
Yeah.
So you're a tree.
But I also had to make choices. I had to choose.
Yeah, you grew. The damage didn't knock you down.
Yeah, no, it didn't knock me down.
I'm bonsai. That was planted in the same time. Seeds planted at the same time, but I'm this big. Not because I wanted to be, but because I put wire around myself and clipped. You can only blame other people to a certain extent. And then of course, no one ever told me, even though I come from a very staunch Christian home and community and extended family, my spirituality to me was and is very, very, very precious. And way before anyone ever caught me out, before I had to come out, I altered my behavior in a way which matched so that I did not stand out. And that's one wire around the plant. You speak in ways that when someone catches you out, usually it's a small child, because children can see the truth. And then that small child says, "You're like a girl, you talk like a girl." You put more wire around yourself and you make sure you remember what you said and the way you said it, and you make damn sure you don't speak that way again. You put more wire. And if someone you take note, you take tips, and you look around, and so that you stay in that thing you are forcing yourself to be in. And how I translated my spirituality, I had the same expectations possibly that my family had of me. I expected me to be straight. I expected myself to have a wife, to have children. Those were expectations I had on myself. No one came to me and said, "I expect you to do this and that." I was the living, breathing embodiment of that whole Christian family dream. I wanted that. Yeah. I ended up being a very, very different person on the inside. And so I stayed quite small, and bonsais probably need a lot of therapy. They are traumatized little trees. And getting back to mental health, meeting Warren, we're both quite fiery people. We both have tempers, we both get very enthusiastic and excited, passionate. We laugh a lot, we fight a lot, we do everything a lot. But Warren never had those issues. And it was important for me to be with a person who had the capacity to care for me because I had and have those issues. But it was no one that was no one ever bullied me because no one detected me. No one had to correct me because no one detected me. But those were self-imposed wires I did to stunt myself. Those bent branches and clipped roots, they don't just grow back. You never reach that full height. There's time that's been wasted. There's habits where you forced yourself to sit up straight, you forced yourself to walk butcher, you forced yourself to speak deeper. And when that habit sticks, you don't know who you would have been if you never restrained yourself. So much of who I am today was years and years of training myself to be and look and speak and walk a certain way to protect myself and to make sure that I was acceptable to God. Because I love God. I do. Of course, there were moments of turmoil. And then friends that you meet along life's way that love you, not despite who you are, but precisely because you are who you are. When you tell them about how wonderful your Christian upbringing was, how you miss the church, how you miss the hymns, how I miss the hymns, how you love God, and then like, but why would you do that? If we look at the history and the state of the world, it's always religions that oppress people. And then I tell them, just like I cannot cut my gayness out of me, I cannot cut my religion and my faith out of me. They are as tied to me as the other. And my deep spirituality and love, I have learned through lots of struggling that my faith lasts and outlasts religion. That the details, they say the devil is in the details, and I believe it. But my faith connects me in a very deep way to my sense of God and to my God, and to how I understand and believe in Him. And that struggle has made my spirituality much better because I've had to struggle for God. I've had to fight for Him, to find Him, and to keep holding on to Him. It wasn't easy for me to be Christian. It would have been easy for me to let go of it because nothing around me or in the history of Christendom told me that I fit. But I couldn't let go. To answer your question more specifically, those influences of internal turmoil, yes, they were there, but they were not from other people. My upbringing and my Christian education was so strong in me that I did my own binding. Which is why I had to come out. Because even in my adulthood, people still didn't know I was gay. So I had to come out. Warren, in my mind, in a certain way, was lucky because he didn't need to come out to anyone. They knew. He didn't need to build up that anxiety. They knew. He is, as he sits here today, he is 100% Warren. I am Glynn, but I have no idea who I would have been if I didn't bind myself. But I eventually had to get to the point where I had to say to people before they started, asking like, we've been asking you for years, where's the girlfriend? I had to be like, look, she's not coming. She's never coming. And I have to tell you this. I have to cut your expectations short and possibly disappoint you and possibly anger you or possibly make you lose your mind with despair. And so I had to come out because I hid it so well. But when you hide things, hiding becomes a habit, and habits are difficult to break.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna skip those two, the prejudice ones, because I'm going to assume it's yes anyway.
Ask them.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I think Warren's spoken about it more. I haven't really.
Okay.
What I mean is you've spoken about the bullying and the teachers, and You've spoken about that.
Yeah. But what's the question? Just ask the question.
I'm going to take our score for both of you. Then I'm going to make these to be the last 3 questions.
What about the prejudice one? What was that question?
Yeah, no, I'm going to ask
Oh.
I'm going to ask prejudice.
Okay.
So, have either of you or both of you faced prejudice within your community, your family, or your friends, because of who you love?
Yes.
Yes. But to make a long story very short, you learn how the situations and circumstances teaches you how to eventually stand up for yourself. For example, in my whole primary school career, long story short, yes, I was bullied and bullied a lot. But when I came to high school, I knew how to fend for myself. And that's when I became a stronger person.
Okay. That was lovely short.
There we go.
So that was your community of like primary school and
Yes. But outside of school, in my community, as in like at home, again, I didn't care. I didn't care.
Like close friends?
No, I had lovely friends. I really like nice friends, but it's also different if I think a lot of the prejudice comes from when your one friend comes to you and says, look, I got this picture of this girl. I cut it off the magazine. You know, it's making me feel a certain way. And then I go, look, I've got this picture of this guy. I cut it off a magazine. And he goes,
We don't do that here.
Now it leaves him confused. And then either he stays your chummy or he doesn't stay your chummy.
You start losing contact.
Yes, you start losing contact because they're trying to now figure out, and then they go to their parents and they talk to their parents about this. You understand? And then either, like I said, he either stays your chummy or he doesn't become your chummy, or they stay away for a while and they play with other friends, but then also they come back to you because, you know, Warren is into that, but he's a nice person. I'm going to stay with a nice person.
Okay. What about at work? Have you ever faced prejudice at work?
Prejudice at work, most of my life I was in the arts, so no.
Please just say you were a ballerina. I really want to say that out loud.
Ballet dance.
I used to be a male ballet dancer.
Male ballet. That's
Yes.
like what I wanted to be saying this whole time.
Yes. No, I mean the artistic world is
Anyway, ballet dance.
It's not.
Ballerina.
It's-
That's
yeah.
Moita. Because I said ballerina.
it's art.
Okay. And you, Uncle Glenn? You, Glenn?
Prejudice, when I was pretending, no, of course not. When I came out, yes. And kids, when they are bullied or hear unkind things, they remember it for a long, long time. But there's something about kids that is very, very resilient and elastic. When kids bounce back and they learn to defend themselves, they remember those things. But they've developed strategies to stand up straight. When you encounter that as an adult, you have no such elasticity that you develop in your childhood. You know, when you're in your 20s, you're already, you know, in your shape and in your form, and you haven't developed in a way which has needed to put on armor. And so you have no armor, and then when those things come from quarters where you least expect them from, they are very hurtful. You can process them better because you're an adult, and cognitively, you can understand why people are saying unkind things. As a kid, you don't. Your mind is qualitatively different as a kid because you're still developing. But yes, I have experienced discrimination from within my extended family, not my immediate family, from my extended family, from within church community, from within in the workplace. And Yeah, yeah, there has been. So the answer is yes. And I still do. I still do.
In 2021, you still do.
Things still happen in
Yeah,
2021.
People, I mean, in Ecclesiastes, there is nothing new.
There's nothing new under the sun. Yeah.
People don't change.
The reason why one experiences in 2021 is because of the older generation and their mindset. But I'm very impressed and happy with the youth these days. Everybody is much more aware, much more conscious, much more woke, awake. And I think everybody stands a good chance. I mean, the little boy or the little girl that wants to come out and let people in stands a good chance of being a happier individual.
Less broken.
Less broken. And because of the direction and the shift, that kids have these days. I mean, like our nieces and our nephews, they are so strong-minded. They know, and they kind of figure out for themselves. They know they know how to tease. Teasing hasn't become it's not a terrible, horrible thing anymore. People these kids, they don't really say these nasty things to each other like they do back in the day. Because I think parents are also much younger these days and also much more aware and mindful. So they teach their kids differently.
Okay.
But I think this younger generation of wanting to come out, and also older people wanting to come out, they stand I think they're in a much more safer space. They're all in a much more safer space. So they mustn't be afraid.
Well,
no,
I mean, we speak from a particular point of our socioeconomic
Oh yeah, that's very important role in all of this.
location in the world, in South Africa and in Cape Town. Our experience are not generalities.
Yeah.
This is our lived reality. We're speaking about our individual pasts. But it's not safe for everyone. It was safe. It's safer for us. I think that there's big intersectionality with race, gender, and class. And when I say class, I mean in economic terms. I mean working class, lower middle class, upper middle class, and then, homeless or, really abject poverty. And then within that, there's race and gender.
Yeah.
So what the stats tell us is that if you are a very poor black lesbian, things are definitely not safe for you. If you are a white male, upper middle class person, you may not even experience discrimination. You may just experience a lack of opportunity, but not overt prejudice.
Yeah, that's true.
We, through our work, by being, what do they call them? Dinkies.
What's a dinky?
Yeah, what's that?
DINK. Kids, it's very, very nice. Become a dinky. Double income, no kids.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So we are dinkies. We're a double income with no kids. And these are global things. I mean, so economically, we can progress further than people who only have a single income with a double income, but there's lots of kids because you have to spread your money thin. But for the two of us who are dinkies, we have enough economic and social mobility to ensure our safety, to choose the people who we surround ourselves with. There are people who cannot choose their community. They cannot move out of their communities. They are where they are, and if that is a harsh place, that is their reality. If I want to move tomorrow, the two of us, we can move. If this place suddenly became oppressive and violent, we have the mobility to move. So we can only speak from our perspectives. But we are pretty privileged. We are educated, male. And that already is a lot of privilege.
Yeah, yeah. By virtue of having
And
means.
we are employed, we're housed, we have a vehicle, we are healthy. There's a lot of privilege going on there. So we do experience prejudice, and we have in the past. But as gay people in a city like Cape Town, in a suburban or urban setting, in a very urban setting, that's our experience.
Yeah, no, I like that you mentioned the intersectionality of it, because I actually want to have this one particular person I want. His name is Kisler, and I want him to explain intersectionality. I did jurisprudence with him a few years ago, and the way he explained it was just amazing. And I want to get him on to try and explain it, because Sharon Cox had mentioned the same thing. She had said that she, as a white lesbian woman, can walk to a pub thing in a neighborhood area, have a few drinks, and she can walk back without having to worry about fear or being attacked or whatever else.
Because of her sexuality.
And her sister in Kailicha, who identifies as a lesbian black woman, who goes to have a few drinks and comes back home, they don't have that same safety.
No.
So that is very important.
Yeah. And I mean, because we're talking about sexuality and visible sexuality and visible heteronormativity, the experiences mean that we are at a slight disadvantage to heteronormative or straight people, but we're much safer than people in other settings.
Yep.
But at the same time, if we look at class, I'm talking about the cultural stuff, middle class morality. There's a lot of face saving. And in those settings, it could be very dangerous, not physically, but in terms of inclusion, in terms of family acceptance. If you are now middle class from a successful family and you're gay, you're messing up the picture.
Yeah, you are.
You're messing up the picture, and there's a lot of pressure for you to actually leave that. There's a lot of, from within the family, from within the extended family, from the business connections, from the school connections. And often you find in Cape Flats communities, friends of mine that live there and that way, people come out different, and it's just another person who has that kind of different, And so speaking to people, getting to know people, it seems that in many cases, poorer communities, working class communities are kinder to people who are queer than middle class people.
Yeah. I think
if you're middle class and you come out, you best make sure you have your own money. Like if you are financially independent, this was a massive ball I had in my court, was that I was financially, and I have always been financially independent as an adult. So when I came out, I couldn't be deprived of anything but acceptance. I had my own transport, my own roof over my head, my own food. I built up my own friend circle so that I had social support. I didn't. Am I boring?
You're going on. You're going on.
But personal financial independence. Earlier you spoke about some of the people who have messaged you. And it's a very difficult thing to comment on. So, in my experience, if you are financially independent, I waited until I was financially independent because I knew I would be. Not everyone has that future.
Yeah.
Some people don't finish school. Some people, when they start working, have to support another family.
Yeah.
They can't leave their situation. They don't want to leave their situation because that's where home is. And then you can't wait for financial independence because it's not an option. What happens in that stage, I don't know. I thought it was wise for me and for people like me, if you foresee any of this middle class backlash, or you're going to be put out on the street with no street smarts, wait until you've got your own money and then you can tell people. But it's a very difficult thing to.
Okay. So, this will be a quick question because my head is all sorry. So, heterosexual privilege in terms of relationships, like especially, well, at least for me, I've always known you to be Glynn and Warren, and then, but now outside of that, the world isn't geared towards having same-sex marriages, and like, well, if I may say about your impending marriage one day. So obviously we have the civil unions thingy and all of that stuff. But even that, it wasn't in the Marriage Act, it was a whole new act. And how Sharon Cox had a wonderful list of things that were heteronormative things, that marriage was one of them. And parenting, and how the birth certificate says mother and father and it doesn't say the synapse. So how do you navigate this? I mean, as a committed relationship that is homosexual, how do you navigate this heterosexual privilege?
We don't really.
We don't what?
We don't need to navigate issues of marriage and children because marriage isn't a big, like a wedding is not a big pressure on us, and having kids, we don't have kids and we're not going to have kids. So if I answer your question, it's an unqualified answer. You know what I mean? I don't actually think that I have the range to talk, to comment on that, because there are people that have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I have no clue what I'm talking about in that case. But, I mean, I can talk about the fact that...
Yeah, I'm not pretty clued up.
Yeah.
But we know that heterosexual privilege definitely exists.
Yes, it does. It does exist. And we tap into it. You know, we tap into it in that people experience us as quite a heteronormative couple.
Yeah.
It's a completely nonsense way of looking at it because it's not true. But when people meet us for the first time, they may be uncomfortable because it's a gay couple. But then after spending half an hour with us, then they're like, okay, we can fit these two into our mental frame, our societal framework. Glynn is the man, Warren is the woman. They are together. They are monogamous. Okay, we'll just treat them like a straight couple. And then we have...
Why am I the woman?
Some people just
really
do it like that.
Why am I the woman?
Because you're more beautiful.
He's the princess.
They don't know that, and they don't know that. They see...
He's the princess.
They see bigger-bodied Graf. They see taller, more elegant.
Beautiful lady.
They see less effeminate. They see more effeminate, and then they fit that into this into that straight box. And it works for them because they can understand it in that way, and it benefits us because we don't really have to explain ourselves a lot, even though their assumptions may be completely wrong.
Yeah.
It's not of our design, but what I've noticed is other couples that don't have our configuration of attributes struggle more, So people just think, that thing of like colored people will say, "Visi man and visi vrou."
Everybody asks that.
So you can't hit everyone. So, it just happens. We're going on 12 years of being together. But heteronormativity and heterosexual privilege definitely exists. Even within gay people, we have privilege. Because we seem to be people that can fit easily into straight society, and other people are more different within the queer spectrum. And so we are quite palatable to heteronormative society.
I think others have a lot. There are
More
people,
hardship.
There are people that have more hardship.
Yeah.
There are people that have harder problems, more tough, more difficult, more.
And when we look at our relatively easy lives,
there are people with bigger problems.
Yeah. Well, when I look at our relatively easy life and now, not our pasts, our relatively easy life. Now, and other couples like us, gay, committed, monogamous, male couples. And then I speak to other people who aren't fitting into that, but they're within the queer spectrum. We are pretty much at the top. We have it easiest.
Yeah.
We have it the easiest. Like transgender people within different settings, different socioeconomic settings. Poor black lesbian people, when you hear about corrective rape and things like that happening, none of those things are even a remote threat for us.
Yeah.
So I think we spoke a lot about our past and making that who we are today.
But it's not who we are.
But
Not today.
those threats are not ours.
Not geared towards you.
And if we think that 40 years ago that was not a South African norm, then we have come a long way for people like us. And we don't represent everyone. Our story is not everyone's story.
Everybody's different stories. Okay, the last question. Very last question. How can we better serve a society? Or not serve, I guess. How can we better, I don't know, I don't think awareness is the right term, but how do we as society just do better in terms of how we see and approach the queer community? What can we do better? We're already doing awareness. We're already trying to speak about it. We're trying to do all of these wonderful things. What else is there that we can do? I mean, we're already spoken about acceptance and
Just be a decent human being.
I know.
I think just treat each other nicer.
Yeah, just have compassion to everyone. And
A kind word goes a long way.
just in support of that, like, I have an issue with the queer community, the gay community, because we are all just part of human society, whether we like that or not. You can try and remove yourself, it doesn't matter. We are all, and so all the differences between us and all the boxes we put ourselves in, the boxes other people put us in, we all happen to live in the same street, not by choice, but that's just where we are, and we're all quite different. I don't see myself as part of a queer community. I'm a queer person.
Okay.
There are other queer persons that I can identify with, but we're not sitting around a campfire at night. We don't all live together. We are embedded within society in 2021. And decency towards people is universal. No one needs to do anything extra for us, like come and pat us on the head and say, shame, we're compassionate. No, just be compassionate to everyone.
Yeah.
And if you're being a duos, be a duos to everyone, because you're a duos. But
Are you going to edit that out?
don't pick on people.
Yeah, that's
Just
true.
let people
Let people
live.
Let people live
Just
their
let
lives.
people live.
There's only one life. There's no second. There's no second chance. We're not coming back. Well, whatever people believe. But I just personally believe I personally believe that I have this one life, this one shot, this one chance. I believe I'm not coming back. So I'm going to treat people as best as I can, because I only have this one chance.
And if you're a queer person and you have the opportunity and ability, shine.
Yes.
Because kids need role models
And
that
learn
fit the struggle they are
to
feeling.
put the pride aside and ask for help or encourage someone to reach out and seek help. Don't say to people with problems, get over yourself, get over it, snap out of it, because you don't. Encourage the person, encourage each other to reach out and seek help. There are many, 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 many organizations out there, free of charge.
Thank you very, very much.
Pleasure.